Class is in session here at the prestigious Apartment Academy. The Apartment Academy podcast here is the multifamily's only operations-focused podcast featuring insights from industry leaders, investors, vendors, and technology providers. So if you invest in multifamily real estate or you're involved in the day-to-day on-site operations of apartment buildings, we are your source for efficient operations and maximizing ROI. Today's podcast was actually going to be part one of two because we had a great discussion with Professor Brent Williams over at the Multifamily Insiders, and we love if you don't on a regular basis visit either Multifamily Insiders or the Multifamily Share Space on Facebook. You do not have your finger on the pulse of what people are talking about in this industry, and we are lucky enough to have Brent bring a little slice of that to the Academy here and talk about some of the things that are most important. So part one is talking about how there really is a staffing crunch in the industry generally, but first of all, we talked about maintenance and how you just have to learn to do more with less, probably, and what strategies are behind that. And there's some great suggestions that came out of that. So here is Professor Williams. Oh, well, Professor Williams, thank you for coming and returning to the Apartment Academy here. Appreciate you returning to the lecture hall here at Studio 101 at the Apartment Academy.
Happy to be here. Love it.
I think Brent, a lot of people, at least I hope, a lot of people know who you are at this point because your Multifamily Insiders platform has tremendous reach and a lot of participants, a lot of people visiting the website. But for those that aren't familiar with your background and some of the things that you guys are up to right there over at MFI, why don't you just give us just a minute on what it is that you guys do, your background, how you got in the industry, how did you join this crazy train? And then we can talk about some of the stuff we want to chat about.
Yeah, I think I'm one of the few that actually went with purpose into multifamily. I didn't somehow find my way into multifamily like so many others. What my background was in finance, which was not at all related to what I do now. I do just social stuff now. It's completely unrelated. But I had lived in apartment communities for many years, and I thought, you know what? If I knew just one person in my community, I might actually renew. And instead, I didn't. And so I just kind of hopped around finding the latest concession that I could. And it was always a frustration of mine. So I came into the industry very much resident retention focused, and how can we improve that and make that experience better for residents, not just on the physical items, because I think a lot of people they think about what type of physical amenities are there, but how are we actually creating this social platform within a physical space of an apartment community. How do we get people to actually talk to each other and get to know each other and that sort of thing? So I got in the space actually creating a social network specifically for apartment communities themselves so that residents could talk to each other, and found out after I jumped headfirst that a lot of the property management companies had no interest in having the residents talk to each other. This was, of course, back when MySpace was still big. So there was still a lot of question marks about how social media, social networking actually fit into people's lives. So kind of changed tacks and decided, well, there wasn't, as I was getting in the industry, I was new and I was trying to find out information. Well, how do communities work? How does that process work? And I couldn't find anything online, really. There was one little forum that I found, but that's about it. So I thought, well, why don't we have a social network for the industry so that people could come on there and they could kind of crowdsource knowledge on how to run properties the best way they can. And the idea was then to also then showcase what social networking was like to the industry, so that we could then go back to our original idea and bring social networking to the apartment communities themselves. But we never went back because the social network for the industry itself just took off. And so I never looked back. It's been great ever since. I have the best job in the industry because all I have to do really is find interesting people, interesting ideas, and put a spotlight on those things. And I let people shine, and I just sit back and just show everybody else how amazing these people are. And it's a great way for people to share their ideas, their knowledge, both best practices and also forward-looking, what's happening, what's coming in the industry. And that's always a lot of fun too. So it's all about people just connecting and making themselves and their jobs better.
Yeah, and you have a number of great forums for that. You have, there's an active dialogue discussion that happens on the website. You've got a number of people posting blog posts on a regular basis. An amazing amount of content comes from there. But one of the most, for me, one of the most compelling components of the program and what you guys have assembled is your Webinar Wednesday series. I've been listening to those for over a year now. I've been participating in those, and there's so much amazing information that's shared there, and as well on the other forums that we thought, well, maybe we could bring some of those highlights, some of the things that of all the information that's shared through Multifamily Insiders, let's bring some of the more interesting things here to the Academy and reinforce, dive a little deeper, perhaps talk to the operations side of the house about the implications of some of these things that you guys are discussing. And one of them that came up was from a gentleman from Plus One Consulting who was talking about how the workforce, for a number of reasons, aging, the great resignation, for a number of reasons, the multifamily industry is really losing people, especially on the maintenance side of the house. And one of the things that we're wrestling with is how to replace them, but maybe they're not. It's not something we're going to be able to easily. It's not a resource we can easily replenish, and maybe we have to do more with less. We have to be more efficient on the maintenance side of things. And it was a really interesting discussion. So let's talk a little about that today. Frame that problem for us that Mark described.
Yeah, we were really lucky to have Mark Cukro join us, and he was talking about how to get maintenance done when you're short-staffed. And I believe he said 75% of companies right now are short-staffed in terms of maintenance, and that's just an astounding figure. And so it's affecting everybody in the industry at this point. And so he was saying how that people are aging out of the industry mainly because maintenance is very, very labor intensive. And so it's difficult, as we all get up there in years, to then crawl, beneath sinks and just get into the spots that is really difficult for maintenance to get into, that we're seeing an accelerated rate of retiring between that 50 and 55-year-old mark. And then what's happening is then you lose, that wealth of knowledge, and we're replacing it with, people who are fresh in the industry who don't have that expertise. So how do you maintain some of that? How can we, make that transition easier? One thing that he mentioned that he's done and he recommends people try out is kind of a mentoring approach via FaceTime and other kind of video conferencing approaches, where let's say that I'm a maintenance tech, I'm new, I don't really know all the ins and outs, I need some help. So I am there with my water heater, for example, and I can FaceTime somebody who they still have all that wealth of knowledge, but I can be the one, maybe if I'm new, I'm still young, I'm not young anymore, but let's say I am, getting in there, and I can then FaceTime show the exact situation, and then my mentor can then give me some feedback on what I'm supposed to be doing in that scenario. So it's a way to then kind of maintain that relationship with our amazing maintenance professionals who have such a great wealth of knowledge, and not let them just kind of disappear, and with it all that institutional brain knowledge.
Right. That's an innovative approach. There's a number of things like that what I think we should touch on today. But I want to kind of rewind a little bit and talk about kind of the core problem, because there are maintenance people in the world, right? There are craftsmen and people that are in the vocational trades, And the problem, I think, one of them for the multifamily industry is that in let's call it private practice or in other trade organizations, they generally can make more money. The apartment multifamily industry has always been challenged with providing wages that are competitive outside of this industry, and part of that reason is driven by the fact that there you can only squeeze so much out of a rental income budget before before NOI is impacted, and now you have an investment that's frankly not performing. So there's always this tension, especially in a scenario where you have a third party management company who's working for an owner who's not self-managing. There's always this tension between what can we pay in order to attract experienced, enthusiastic, engaged individuals, as opposed to, well, how much can we afford before our net cash flow, our cash on cash returns are started to be impacted. And that's always been a problem, and now it's been exacerbated by the fact that I think people have easier choice. If they don't want to work in the apartment industry, it's easier than ever for them to find other work. Would you agree with that? Was there another component of all of this that came up during that webinar?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. He said that I think maintenance is paid on average 20% less than competitive industries that they could go to. So we're definitely running behind that in that aspect. There's also elements of there's things that we can do to make their experience better. We had a poll. I was talking with Adrian Danila a while back, and it was a poll about, are you paying premiums for people being on call? Are you paying premiums for actually coming out on call? So it's you have to be with your phone next to you. Are we paying a premium for that? And I think that, again, it comes down to pay and whether that budget can afford that. But there's so many different levels of we're not addressing the challenges. I mean, it is challenging to be on call and maybe get a call at 2:00 in the morning. How can we make that a better experience for our maintenance technicians, both paid and not paid?
Yeah, well, yeah. And when that call comes at 2 a.m, the person you go to meet at that hour is never happy. Like, you are about to have a bad experience, and we don't compensate for that either. Really, I don't feel like we justly compensate for the emotional component of having to deal with people who are upset because something is broken, it's not working right, or they're locked out, and these folks, these individuals are on the front lines of those discussions. If they don't react with complete decorum, or if they don't react in a calm manner to what can be a very adversarial engagement, well, then the company looks bad, the company's in trouble, and then they get in more trouble, and it's difficult on all kinds of fronts. Making the experience, I think what you led with saying is, we don't make the experience for them as pleasant as it could be to help retain them. That's part of it too. So pay is part, and then what we can do to just improve the daily lives of maintenance workers.
Yeah, so let me kind of cite what he said as far as he said maintenance is overwhelmed and overstressed. Here are 3 changes that he recommends. The very first thing he says, work environment specifically. He said that specifically the word respect comes up a lot in his discussions with the maintenance teams. And right there, I mean, as we talk today, there's actually going to be some really interesting overlaps between the question of pay and the question of intangibles, and how I would say that we are definitely not paying team members in multifamily enough relative to their peers. However, we're seeing that there's a lot of other things that are impacting people's, quality of, appreciation of multifamily well beyond pay. And so, respect, if that keeps coming up, I mean, I think that there still is a major issue of how the maintenance teams are viewed relative to maybe their on-site office counterparts, and how are they seen on an equal footing. I think there's a lot of companies who still struggle in that respect on how to show respect to their maintenance teams in the value that they're bringing to the community every day.
Yeah. The respect, they don't feel the respect from their colleagues. I was talking about residents, which is also a problem. But yeah, if they don't feel the same level of respect from their colleagues on site, that's worse in some ways, because they really have earned it.
We see it on the training side a lot, where, and now this is just my little world of training, but we see companies who will pay to have their office team members, on-site office team members, take a course and actually set aside time to take that course. And with maintenance, we're seeing not nearly as many companies to give them that time, figure out how can you make it so that, now granted, on maintenance, you never know what's going to come up, and there are maintenance emergencies that do pop up on a regular basis. But I feel like there's a lot of companies who still don't think about a strategy of how are we going to train them. And training is a form of respect. It's showing that we care enough about you to increase your skill sets. And so by not kind of putting out that effort is sending a signal to the maintenance teams that just do your job. We're not going to, amplify the skill sets that you have.
Where does a career path go? Like one thing that people need to sort of feel like, there's a home for me here. I'm dedicated. I'm committed to this company. Is they need to see some vision for where they can go, and if you look at the industry, like sort of middle management, upper management, even, you don't see a lot of maintenance folks that have ascended to, certainly not regional managers, but not even property managers, right? So once you're a service manager on site, unless you're with a large company who has like senior directors of maintenance and whatever, and there's, that's maybe the top 50 multifamily companies, there's really not a whole lot of places you can go after you're the senior, technician there.
Yeah, that's I would say maybe a lack of creativity on the part of our industry of how to provide a path going forward. That's one thing Mark said, was that, a lot of people reflect and say, am I just going to be working in the same property for 20 years, same job, same property? And is that really gratifying from a career perspective? And I would say a lot of people, if they really thought forward and go, wow, this could be, what I'm doing for 20 years, that may not be enough for them.
So what were some of let's get to some practical solutions, Brent. What were some things that were discussed as steps that operators can take to attract, retain, train better our maintenance workforce?
One of the big things that he mentioned was tools, and how if there are not enough tools, that they have to be shared across maintenance techs, so that you're always having to wait to get that tool that you need in order to do something. It's going to just kill productivity. As he mentioned that, it also made me wonder about, his whole webinar was about how to get things done when you're understaffed. And I could be wrong about the economics of this. I understand that I may not have the whole picture here, but a lot of our communities are have very high occupancy. And if they're understaffed on the maintenance side, that means that they have this amount of money that they would be paying a maintenance technician, but they don't have one right now. Why couldn't they allocate that to more tools for the maintenance team and more updated tools? He was saying that a lot of tools that maintenance technicians have to deal with are old and outdated. And some types of tools, that's okay. If it's a hammer, that you're gonna be fine, right? But there are a lot of measurement tools that it really makes a big difference whether or not that tool is 5 years old or not. And there's something else I think that could play a role into this, and he didn't mention this, but I remember so in a prior life I ran cable through residential homes I did like coax and Ethernet and that sort of thing. We did smart homes, and it was fun to work with those, the higher level tools, the higher level systems. It made me feel interested in my job, right? And it was neat to have those gadgets, as it were. And so I think there's probably also an element of pride in your work when you have a little, better tools, and you're not working with these, these things that have been around forever. They don't work half the time. So he said the number one thing was making sure they had the proper resources so it's not holding them back. The second real main point that he had was think about productivity from a timing perspective. And most people are most productive the first half of the day. So what we want to do is not interrupt our maintenance technicians so that they can get into a groove, they can get going. And a lot of times they get pulled away by saying, a text that says, hey, can you check in on apartment 306? So, to work on whatever. And it may not be a priority, but now you've got this directive. And he said that every time a maintenance technician has to switch tasks, it costs 23 minutes of productivity every time they switch. And so that's a huge amount of time. I did some kind of back of the napkin math on that. And if the office team can reduce the amount of interruptions they give to a maintenance tech by just one time during the day, each day, that equates to about $2,000 in man hours or woman hours to get more things done. And that's just per maintenance technician. I mean, multiply that for each technician, you get a pretty good chunk of change as far as additional labor for each person. So, and it's also less frustrating. It's never fun to constantly be pulled away what you're trying to do and get thrown onto another task. So really focus on that, and also focus on the ugly work first. Because if we're more productive at the beginning, do the hardest, biggest challenges first, and then later in the day when your mind is a little tired, you're a little tired, maybe change out the air filters or something at that point. Focus on the really tough things first.
Yeah. Eat the frog first.
Yep, exactly.
If you eat the frog first, the rest of the days, everything's easier from there. Did they, I don't remember, did they talk about where technology might play a role to help? Because trying to keep people on task, trying to prioritize things for people, trying to communicate, what's urgent and what can we, that is all sometimes difficult to do on the fly. Did he mention all technology or anything that could help on that front?
I don't recall offhand, but that's absolutely true. I mean, the more a system can be in place where they know exactly where they need to go next, they know exactly what's on their schedule. They don't have to make as many runs back to the shop because it's not scheduled out in a very efficient way. I mean, that's all part and parcel to that increased productivity.
Yeah. If you're trying to do more with less, if you're trying to keep people on point, you're going to have to turn to technology, I think, in order to really make that happen, because the pen and paper and a clipboard or even an Excel spreadsheet, it just doesn't cut it anymore. Like we've got to be maximum. We've got to have maximum efficiency when they're out there, and having them return to the office to see what's next, like real time on their device, that kind of stuff. I think that would all be important on that front.
Absolutely, and there's so many great tools out there right now. I'm sure Leonardo 24/7 can help in a lot of those functions. So I mean, people need to look into what's available out there, and I think it's a lot of people just don't realize all the different options available to them.
Yeah. Certainly, Leonardo would be perfect for that sort of thing. Anything else on the front that on the doing more with less that came out during that you want to share?
I think he had a ton of great takeaways. I'm sure I have missed plenty in there. I just put some of the top ones I could think of. But yeah, if anybody wants to check out the whole session and really get some deep dive into what he was talking about, they can still access it on Multifamily Insiders. I believe if they go to multifamilyinsiders.com/ short-staffed, I think it is. They can go and get a direct link to Mark's event.
Awesome. Well, we spent a lot of time with that. Brendan, I want to talk about something else, but let's take a break. We'll do that. How we'll do that in a second session.
Sure, that sounds great to me.
Okay, awesome. So that's a break here for us. We're going to stop with part 1 of Brent's lecture here at the Stately Apartment Academy. Take a break, go back to your homes, study up, review your notes, and come back for part 2. Which we'll post here as well. If you enjoy these podcasts here at the Apartment Academy and you feel like your management company could use a little advice from some of the professors here, then go to our website, apartmentacademy.com, and click Help Me. We'll send you a questionnaire and provide individualized responses to your answers at no charge that I guarantee will offer you insights on ways you can immediately improve apartment operations. Until next time, I am the Dean of the Apartment Academy, Daniel Cunningham, bidding you farewell, and my office hours are posted.